Okay, guys, we've just been talking about how amazing plants are. Now, I just want to use that common sense I was talking about in thinking about what plants do. They photosynthesize using sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide. And just think about their structure and their function based upon utter common sense. And you see here that we've got the parts of a plant. And I genuinely will be amazed if you guys could not have guessed that these things were required in a plant before you started learning biology. And now you know biology, I think sometimes there's almost an increased level of fear, because the more you know, the more you forget what you really know. And so let's just go through these. Okay, we've talked about a plant being a machine. It turns sunlight and water and carbon dioxide into sugar. It does that for itself, so it can carry out respiration with that glucose. The glucose it makes from photosynthesis, it stores as starch. The reason it stores it as starch is because starch is insoluble, and so it's a bit like putting it in the bank. Just as a cross-reference, we as animals do not store our glucose as starch, we store it as glycogen, and that's one of the differences between animals and plant cells. So if we've got a machine that uses carbon dioxide and water and sunlight to do what it needs to do to stay alive, what's it going to have? Well, it needs water. Water comes down as a result of gravity and goes into the ground. So here are the roots, okay? And you see here, it says roots hold the plant steady in the ground, suck up water and nutrients as well, okay, and they store food. Now, storing food can also be done by specialist roots like a potato, when you dig down, and that is a potato, you might remember, is very starchy. Starch is what plants use to store food. They're not storing that starch for you and me to have chips. They're storing it for themselves so they can carry out respiration to survive. Remember, any organism has a drive within it to survive, to pass on its genes. And so in order to survive, it needs to live to get to a stage where it can breed. We'll come to breeding in a second. But let's just think, if it needs to make its own food, which by the way, key word is autotroph. A plant is an autotroph. We are heterotrophs. Hetero means different. We eat a different, we need something different to give us food. We don't make it ourselves. Plants automatically do it. They're autotrophs. If you're going to use water, carbon dioxide and sunlight, you need to have the vehicles to do it. So we already know that the roots not only offer stability, because if the sun's going to be coming down, you just want to be able to stay in the same place and collect it, and they collect the water. You've got to be raised off the ground. Look at that, the stem raises these leaves off the ground so they can catch the sunlight. It's really, really obvious. But in order to do that, you've got to fight gravity. And so you've got to have lots of structures which enable you to be supported in the air. If you hold your arm up in the air, you do it while I'm talking here, you'll realise that you get tired in about 3 minutes. A plant has got to stay like that, effectively with its arm up in the air the whole time. And although it doesn't have muscles like you do, it needs a system that's going to offer support and pull those leaves up off the ground to enable them to catch the sunlight. This cross-references with osmosis and the way that leaves are with the xylem and lignin, which is a very strong substance which causes the xylem vessels to be waterproof and also offers strength. Plant cell walls are really strong. They've got cellulose in, which is glucose twisted and twisted and twisted and twisted and twisted and joined so many times that it creates like a net which is so strong we can't even digest it with our enzymes. And so plants have evolved this way of supporting themselves by really strong cell walls that do not burst when a cell becomes turgid. They have got lignin impregnating, which means pushing into the gaps of xylem. Okay? But we know that photosynthesis requires sunlight, water and carbon dioxide. We've dealt with getting the water, but we've got to get it up to the leaves. And so that's what the stem does as well. And it does it against gravity, which is pretty amazing. It's got no muscles, remember. And then we've got the leaves themselves. Now the leaves are made so they can catch the sunlight, big surface area. Underneath they've got stomata, which lets carbon dioxide in. Why the stomata underneath? Well, it's common sense, isn't it, really? If they're on the surface, they're open to all the temperature of the sun and the wind, and that's going to make the plant lose water. And so it wants to preserve water, so the stomata and the stomata are underneath the leaves. Also has little adaptations like a waxy cuticle to stop water loss. And therefore the leaves are adapted to catch that sunlight up off the ground. Okay? So that takes care of carbon dioxide coming through the stomata, water coming up through the roots, and sunlight coming from the sky. But that's only half the process, because that gives them the food they need to live. But we've just said, and if you think about it, or you know already, the purpose of an organism, the whole be-all, the end-all, is whether it's able to reproduce and pass on its genes. And so we need a whole nother section. Creating your food is a day-to-day struggle to allow you to live. But why you stay alive is to reproduce. And so here we have the other sections of a plant. Okay? So, in terms of passing on their genes, we now enter the realms of plant reproduction. And once again, if you think about how plants reproduce and the environment they're in, it's kind of common sense, isn't it? So, for example, they have flowers. Why do they have flowers? Why do plants invest all this energy? Because every single structure takes energy to build. And so bright coloured flowers are quite a big investment of the energy that they've made from the sun. And the reason is many, many plants are fertilised, pollinated by insects. And insects have specific types of vision that can see colourful flowers. They invest a lot of energy in producing sugar, which attracts the bees or the insects. And what that does is that allows them to be able to let the insect brush up against them, collect their pollen, and take it to another plant where there can be pollination, where that pollen will meet the ovules of another plant. And that is no different, I promise you, than a man meeting a woman in a bar and having sex. Okay? Two people randomly coming together, two plants coming together. The difference is that the insects are like a dating site. And so, that's why plants have flowers. So, on the other side of that, in this diagram, we've got flowers. But if a plant doesn't have flowers, what does that suggest? Well, it probably suggests that it's not pollinated by insects. So why, if in life energy is really, really important, we're really lucky in life because we can, particularly in this country, because we can eat pretty much as we want and stay really, really healthy, almost too much. But in the real world, in the environment out there, pretty much every single other organism is struggling just to stay alive and get enough energy. If we have a cold snap, birds die, plants die. And so, why would you invest all the energy to create brightly coloured flowers if you're not in fact trying to attract insects? And so the other type of pollination is wind pollination. And that is where pollen is blown in the wind off and it happens to randomly hit other flowers. Okay? That would be a bit more like two people meeting in a bar blindfolded and bumping into each other. Okay? If they were blindfolded, it wouldn't matter whether they were really good looking. You know, if you met somebody on a date, you'd want them to be good looking. But if in fact you just were going to have sex with the first person you met when you were blindfolded, it wouldn't actually matter whether they were Brad Pitt or somebody really ugly. And so think about that. Wind pollinated don't have bright colour flowers to attract insects. They don't have big petals. They, if they rely on wind, have different adaptations. What are they? Well, their equipment, so to speak, hangs out of the flower so it can catch the wind. Its pollen is really small and light. And these are the kind of things that allow it to reproduce. But in a plant, you don't have the lovely ability we do as mammals to put a baby inside us and to grow it and nurture it and look after it from the inside. You need to give it the ability to survive on its own in a possibly hostile environment. And so they create seeds. Seeds are just like eggs. And but a chicken sits on its eggs, for example. But you know the way turtles bury their eggs underneath sand? They're a bit like that. So without any kind of maternal or paternal care, seeds are, they've got the baby plant inside, you can see here, and it packs the seed with nutrition, and that enables the baby plant to have enough energy to grow out of the soil and hit the air, where it's going to hit the sun and create its first photosynthesis and roots to go down. Okay, here we have fruit which protects the developing seeds. And so if you think about a fruit, you can think about a grape or a tomato is actually a fruit with the seeds on the inside. Okay, and so there is an overview of the parts of a plant. But isn't it amazing how much kind of common sense it makes? And with that in mind, we're going to move on now to the way that a plant ensures that those parts it needs to be in the right places are in the right places. Any questions? Email me.